It is the month of October, which is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I wanted to speak about domestic violence and communication as a weapon. So, in abusive relationship, communication is rarely about like connection and understanding. It becomes like a tool of control. Abusers weaponize words, tones, timing, silence to manipulate confusion and like dominate the survivor. This form of psychological abuse is often overlooked because it leaves like no physical mark, but it's one that's actually like most devastating, okay? So abusers control communication by one, gaslighting. So they're twisting facts or denying things said or done to make it like they're the victim, or like say things like, oh, you're overreacting, that's not what happened. Another tactic they use, number two, is withholding and stonewalling. This is like refusing to engage in any meaningful dialogue. They give like the silent treatment or ignore your questions. The abuser's goal is to create a power imbalance and emotional starvation for the victim. A third tool they use is criticism, and they devalue the victim. They constantly are finding faults in the way that the victim speaks or tries to like express themselves emotionally. Over time, when the abuser does this conditions the survivor to like silence themselves in order to keep the peace, because like no matter what they say or do, the abuser is going to find fault in the way that they speak or act or try to express themselves, okay? A fourth tool that abusers often will use is over communication or like information overload, and the excessive like messages, long texts. They have long rants. This can actually look like, I see this a lot when it's like time for bed, where like the victim wants to go to bed and the abuser just like keeps at them and wants to like give them information overload, and they're like exhausted and just like want to go to sleep. So like this tactic is used by the abuser to like wear down the survivor's ability to like think clearly and to like defend themselves. And then like a fifth tactic that the abusers use is interruption and like talking over the survivor. Abusers like to dominate the conversation. They cut off the survivor like mid-sentence and refuse to listen. This reinforces a message of like your voice doesn't matter. So a sixth tool that the abuser will use is like public humiliation or like character assassination. You see this in using like conversations with others, like friends and family, even like colleagues, like court systems, okay? So the abuser purposely like misrepresents or discredits the survivor, okay, to others. And this form of like reputational abuse is like to isolate the survivor from like support networks throughout like their family, friends, community, okay? And then another form of communication abuse that happens by the abuser is actually like digital communication, with social media, monitoring, hacking into accounts, or manipulating communication through phones, emails, text messages, social media accounts, like the constant check-ins, and almost like they use this as a way to shape their narrative, like the abuser shapes the narrative of what they want to be presented out into like the public so if other people see it. So when the abuser is using communication as a form of control, how this impacts the survivor starts to question themselves. This is that self-doubt where, is this really happening? They start to question their own reality. And a lot of times, victims of domestic violence, especially in communication, they don't even realize that they are a victim of it. It might just be so like normal to them where everybody's always questioning them, making them question themselves, like, is this really happening? And this is where this like cognitive dissociation can come in. The survivor feels confused because like the person that's supposed to love them is actually like harming them simultaneously. And it can cause somebody to feel like they're crazy or they're not in reality, like this isn't really what's happening, that this person loves me, but then they're like, wait a minute, this isn't love, this is harming me. So people, if they're coming in from the outside looking in, for example, like, the court system and like GAL investigations and like that, like these people who don't understand domestic violence and never have taken, domestic violence training and things like that, they don't know to look that the survivor is in survival mode. This can create the survivor to look unstable. For example, for myself, when I was sharing my story to a jail about 10 years ago, she looked at me and told me to stop playing the victim. She didn't think my story was true. And when I started to look at my story, I'm like, well, gosh, I wouldn't believe me either, because of how deep and how strategic and manipulated, and how the abuser can get, so many people in their support network to victimize you. It does sound crazy. So the victim will end up becoming hyper vigilance. They constantly are walking on eggshells. They start to question everything they're about to say before it comes out of their mouth. And actually this can lead to the victim becoming very isolated, because communication becomes unsafe, especially when you're trying to, express it to other people who are supposedly trying to help you or investigate things. But it can end up making the victim want to withdraw, because they know that what they're speaking is it's not safe for them to speak. So they're almost being victimized again by speaking their truth. So they're being victimized by the abuser, and then if they're trying to speak to others within a system or a court system type atmosphere, then they end up becoming victimized twice.